Today on r/ProRevenge. Oh, I played the long game. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. Throwaway for obvious reasons, it's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my behind off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property. Shared block, but freehold title. Only thing that was, I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing, didn't know him but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem, I ask for a copy of the policy so I have a record. It gets sent through and lo and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title but a strata title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold, emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being an absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that, he's looking out for himself, I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused, offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of a B-word. And I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private, saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5 to 6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale, for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this, our special day, and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country, the one he was on tour in, always signed Love, L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is not longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told, through said friends of friends, went along the lines of, he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realized what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been balls deep in someone who wasn't his wife, only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful B-word. For our next story. Downstairs neighbors wouldn't turn down music, nuked them from orbit. I was inspired by a recent post to tell my own bad neighbor story. Can't think of a better place to post it. Flashback to 2014, or so. I moved out on my own in 2013 and moved into an old house converted into a 2-floor apartment, directly across from my future in-laws. The downstairs neighbors were loud. Blaring music at all hours, yes, all of the hours, wouldn't cut the grass or take out the trash on our shared schedule. Crappy neighbors, but never bothered me directly. The guy was pretty chill when sober and would turn the music down a little when I texted him. He was okay until his girlfriend moved in. Now add shouting matches to the mix, and all of a sudden my request to turn down the music makes him turn it up. I can barely walk on my super thin floor without her banging on the ceiling with a broom. I was okay since I'm a heavy sleeper and could sleep through anything. My wife moved in and I quickly found out that she is quite the opposite. Fan on turned at a certain angle in the doorway of the bathroom, door closed halfway, blackout curtains with them taped to the wall so zero light comes through, zero sounds other than the fan, you get the idea. I told her that we can't expect them to remain silent when she's ready for bed, we need to be reasonable, but the wall-rattling music needs to stop during the night. She hated it during the day, but I told her there's nothing we can do then, so she would go to her parents' house a lot during the day. I talked to neighbor guy, he said. Yeah, man, that's cool, but it turns out the girlfriend wasn't having it, and his attitude then changed too. Yeah, well, it's our house so you can go with yourself if you think you can tell us what to do, and you can move out if you don't like it. Something definitely had to change once she was pregnant, and then the baby came. So I did the only thing I could do. I fought fire with fire, and maliciously complied with the law to the T. I could only report them for noise after 11:00 p.m. and I now forget the morning hour when the noise could start, but I believe it was 9:00 a.m. My dad has these huge old concert speakers in his garage. Professional grade, black leather bound, 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and a pretty nice vintage stereo and amp out. He has 2, but my apartment was so small, I sadly only had room for 1. We replaced our coffee table with this thing, laid face down onto our thin office carpet. Tired of his crap tunes, I tested this Geneva Convention breaking device when they weren't home. Holy cow. I had to take everything down from tables, counters and shelves because they would shake off. I prepared audio files to feed the stereo. I was giddy like a kid with a new Christmas toy. I turned it on when I left for work and got my wife up to send her to her parents. I came home from work and hung out at her parents until it was close to bedtime. They resisted for 3 days. On day 2 I found a pile of manure on my doorstep, but it didn't faze me. I cycled between scene, saw, and square waves in clashing chords, marching music, Washington Post march on loop, preaching clips, they weren't just atheist, but outspoken anti-Christian, so it was a must. The most stupid songs you could think of, Captain Planet theme song, chicken dance, etc. This poor old house rattled in ways I didn't think possible. The vibrations from the scene wave would make your vision blur. I eventually got a text from him that read, "Sorry man, you can stop now." I did not. He needed a few more days to let it sink in. Plus, I had so much fun putting it together. They complained to the police and the landlord. There was nothing they could do since I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't even hear music during the time of peace to follow. It was so quiet. They would build up their courage and try again every few weeks when I wasn't home, but my wife was. I then showed her how to tame the beast so she could let it loose while I was away. I had to give them a spanking every now and then, but they learned. They were so happy when we moved out. Our last story for today. Maintenance guy throws out 15 years of important knowledge. A while ago I worked at a baseball store called Balmart, or a general goods store that sounded like that. Not so long after the Great Recession of 2008, and management was trying to cut costs because of falling profit. One of the first things management did was fire 2 of the 3 full-time maintenance and cleaning guys. The one guy they kept, I'll call him MG for maintenance guy, was amazing at his job. Everything in the store ran well because of him and his willingness to go beyond what was required to help people. A genuinely nice guy. For 6 months, management tried to make having 1/3 of a maintenance staff work, and it failed miserably. MG could not do everything, and over time management increasingly asked him to coordinate some part-timers that were supposed to do the cleaning and carts. He spent so much time coordinating that he had no time for maintenance. The night crew was also cut so they couldn't pick up the slack. Then 2 things happened within the space of a week that told management how important he was to the store running well. First, some cleaning machines broke down. Turns out they have to be properly cleaned weekly. If left alone they gum up real bad and parts wear out quickly. A several $1,000 repair bill because he was told to prioritize coordinating part-timers over tinkering with machines. A few days later the deli lady nearly quit after the blade on the deli slicer went flying off and could have cut her face badly. Turns out that the bolt that held it in place was loose, and MG had tightened it weekly for her. When he didn't have time to do that anymore, he told management it had to be replaced for safety. Well, management didn't do that because it cost money, but they told people it was fixed. That could have been a lawsuit or criminal charges. They and deli lady got lucky. So management sat down with him and asked him why things were going wrong. MG told them point blank he needed enough time for maintenance, and someone else had to coordinate the part-time cleaners and check up on them. They were rather lazy. Management called BS. They said maintenance should be easy and done quickly. MG got mad because that insulted his professionalism, and he pulled out his notebook from his back pocket. It turns out that over his 15 years he had filled the book with charts, schedules, and diagrams of how to do his job and keep things running. There were over 100 things he checked weekly or monthly. There were a lot of machines he kept in running order. Some had certain things that were half broken, and had to be wiggled in a certain way, etc. To be honest, a lot of these things were minor or major safety hazards, but over the years management was fine with not replacing multi-thousand-dollar machines if MG knew how to keep them working. As well, he did things that he should not have done, like calibrating machines for departments that should have done it themselves or contracted it out, etc. But he was a nice guy, and he liked helping people. He told me that he spent about a half hour telling management about what he did, and he suspected that until then nobody had ever known how much he did. Well, he may have said a few swear words and derogatory things while telling management why he needed time to do stuff. It was not a good moment for him, and he was pissed. At the end, he put his notebook back in his pocket and offered to take a week to write up everything he knew so that management would have written proof of why his job mattered in case a higher-up asked why they increased maintenance costs when corporate was demanding they cut costs. The multiple managers in the room looked at each other and asked him to leave so they could talk in private. He told me, several years later, when I ran into him somewhere and had lunch with him, that he had a premonition as he walked out of the room, so he went to the back room and tossed his notebook in the garbage compactor. For good measure, he then went around the store and emptied all the garbage cans and tossed those bags in so his notebook was properly buried. He was fine with it, all that information was in his head. After a few minutes later, management called him back. They told him that they could not allow him to keep working there because of the level of insubordination he had showed. They said as soon as he surrendered his badge, box cutter, and notebook he would be escorted out of the building by security. They basically treated him like a criminal. Most fired people are not escorted out unless they were suspected of committing a crime that could not be proved. He handed over his badge and box cutter. They asked for the notebook. He said he threw it in the compactor. Their eyes went wide and they asked why he threw it out. He said he thought he was going to write everything up nicely on the computer from memory, so he thought he was done with the notebook. At this point, management starts looking at each other worried, because they had intended to take his book, fire him, and have a less subordinate part-timer, who doesn't get expensive benefits like a full-timer, do his job. Now they couldn't. One of the managers suggested that he be allowed to write up the info before being escorted out. The others agreed. He was given the chance to be unfired just long enough to give them the info. How kind. He laughed and walked out, head held high, and management followed him to his car to make sure he left. I don't have exact numbers, but I guesstimate the store had to spend at least $20,000 or $30,000 to replace stuff that MG had kept working beyond the equipment's lifespan, and the new guy they hired had a heck of a time figuring out how things worked. To be honest, in a few cases, MG had gone too far, like creating fire hazards by taping broken chargers together after rewiring them instead of tossing them, but management had never complained when he saved them money. There was also a lot of things that should have been done by the health and safety team or the departments, but they also never complained about having less work. I asked him if throwing out that notebook was illegal, but he said it was personal property to help him remember things. It was not a work-provided notebook. He was proud of what he did. His pride clearly showed in how he told the story. He said that nobody is allowed to question his professional judgment by implying he is lazy. I agree. And those are all the stories we have for today. See you tomorrow.